Legend: Achilles, the greatest hero of all. Achilles. The name is like a burst of lightning in the night sky, instantly illuminating everything around. It reminds of ancient battles, where the groans of the wounded mingled with battle cries and blood stained the ground red. This name sounds like a voice full of pain and anger, as if this cry comes straight from the depths of the Trojan War. Achilles became the epitome of courage, strength, and tragic fate, a hero whose name still evokes awe. It is believed that the word Achilles comes from the Greek root achos, which means grief or sorrow. This may be due to the fact that Achilles' life was full of suffering and loss, despite all his glory and valor. Others see it as a reflection of the word achelos, water, hinting at the connection of the hero with the water element, because his mother, the sea goddess Thetis. There is another version, linking the name with the concept of achos, horror, which is quite consistent with the image of a formidable warrior, inflicting terror on his enemies. The name of Achilles already carries a certain foreshadowing of his fate, full of suffering, but also great glory. Achilles was the son of King Peleus and the sea goddess Thetis. Imagine how beautiful Thetis must have been, if the gods themselves were courting her. But then a prophecy intervened, which said that the son of Thetis would one day surpass his father. This was something incredible, because these were gods that no one could challenge. So Zeus, the chief on Olympus, decided that the safest thing to do would be to marry Thetis to a mere mortal, King Peleus. That way the child born of this marriage would not pose a threat to the gods. The wedding of Peleus and Thetis could not be called an easy walk. Thetis categorically refused to marry a mortal, considering it beneath her dignity. But Peleus was not going to back down. The centaur Chiron, the wisest of the wise and the teacher of many heroes, came to his aid. Chiron told Peleus how to bypass the resistance of Thetis. During the wedding, the goddess began to turn into different creatures, trying to escape from her groom. But Peleus, following Chiron's advice, held her tightly, preventing her from leaving. Eventually, Thetis had to resign herself to her fate, and she married Peleus. When Thetis and Peleus had a son, Thetis decided that her baby boy should be given a chance to live forever, just like herself. She believed that her boy deserved the same immortal life as the gods. To do this, she took the baby and dipped him in the waters of the sacred river Styx. The water of this river had magical properties, making everything that touched it invulnerable. But here's the problem. Thetis held the baby by the heel, and this tiny part of the body remained dry, untouched by the water. This is why Achilles' heel became his only weak spot, which is now known as Achilles' heel. Achilles spent his childhood away from the bustle of cities and palaces, surrounded by natural beauty and a wise mentor, the centaur Chiron. Chiron was known for his ability to raise real heroes, and under his watchful eye Achilles turned from an ordinary boy into a real warrior with not only strength but also a sharp mind. Chiron taught Achilles everything that a future hero needs to know: hunting, military craft, medicine. These skills were to help him survive in a harsh world full of dangers. Achilles quickly mastered the art of wielding a sword and bow, learned to track wild animals, and treat wounds. But most amazing of all, he learned to run faster than any other man, as if the wind picked him up and carried him forward. Thetis was well aware that her son had many challenges ahead of him. She saw in him not just a warrior, but a future hero, destined to go down in legends. But when the Trojan War broke out, Thetis realized it was time to take action. She could not allow her favorite son to go to war where destruction awaited him. Thetis devised a cunning plan to keep her son out of danger. She sent Achilles to the island of Skyros, where King Lycomedes ruled. There, among the king's daughters, Achilles was to hide from the outside world. To prevent anyone from recognizing his true identity, Thetis dressed him in women's clothes and gave him a new name, Pyrrha. Now Achilles lived among the girls, pretending to be one of them. No one even suspected that under the female mask hides the future great hero. Although Achilles was still very young, he began a relationship with the princess Deidamia, and she later bore him a son, who was named Neoptolemus. Nevertheless, the Achaeans could not begin their campaign without Achilles. The soothsayer Calchanides predicted that without this hero, the war would be lost. One day Odysseus, known for his cunning and shrewdness, arrived at Skyros. He guessed that Achilles might be there and decided to test his hunch. Odysseus brought gifts for Lycomede's daughters, including jewelry and beautiful dresses. But among these gifts he also left weapons, a shield and a sword. When the girls began to look at the gifts, Achilles, unable to stand it, reached for the weapons. This movement gave him away. Odysseus immediately realized that in front of him was not an ordinary girl, but a real warrior. Thus Achilles' true nature was revealed, and soon he left Skyros to join the Greek army and take part in the Trojan War. The Trojan War was a real test for Achilles, changing his life completely. It all began when the Trojan prince Paris stole Helen the Beautiful, wife of the Spartan king Menelaus. This event caused a wave of outrage among the Greek kings, and they decided to unite to get Helen back and punish Troy. King Agamemnon, the brother of Menelaus, stood at the head of the Greek army. Achilles, though he knew he was destined to die in this war, could not stay away. His heart burned with a desire for glory and adventure, and he decided to join the campaign. Along with him went his faithful friend and comrade in arms Patroclus. They were both young, full of energy and determination, and soon became some of the bravest and most respected warriors in the Greek army. For Achilles, it was a chance to prove his skill and gain recognition. He had always dreamed of glory, and now he had a real opportunity to immortalize his name in history. Patroclus, in turn, supported his friend in everything, and together they prepared for the upcoming battles, trained and strengthened morale. For 10 long years, the siege of Troy stretched like an endless series of days and nights filled with blood, sweat, and tears. During this time, Achilles had time to prove himself as a true hero, as he was considered to be. He participated in countless battles, destroying entire Trojan troops, and his name became synonymous with fear and respect among his enemies. One of Achilles' most impressive feats was the destruction of Cycnus, the son of Poseidon. This warrior was considered virtually invincible, and no one could handle him in battle. But Achilles, with his incredible strength and courage, managed to defeat Cycnus, proving that nothing is impossible for a true hero. However, the brightest moment in Achilles' career was his quarrel with Agamemnon. The king, who led the Greek army, took from Achilles the captive Briseis, whom he considered his rightful reward for bravery. This decision by Agamemnon caused Achilles to feel deeply resentful. He felt humiliated and insulted, and in protest refused to continue fighting. Achilles' refusal to participate in the battle had disastrous consequences for the Greeks. Without their best warrior, they began to suffer defeat after defeat. Losses became greater and greater, morale plummeted, and it seemed that victory was out of reach. The Greeks realized that they could not win the war without Achilles, and began to look for a way to make peace with him. But how to convince the proud and resentful hero to return to the battlefield? The first step toward reconciliation was a visit from the elders. Odysseus, Nestor, and other leaders came to Achilles' tent to try to persuade him to return. They brought him rich gifts and promises, hoping that this would help assuage his anger. However, Achilles was undeterred. He declared that he would not return to the battlefield until Agamemnon personally apologized to him and returned Briseis. Agamemnon, realizing that further delay threatened total defeat, agreed to Achilles' terms. He sent envoys with gifts and words of apology, asking forgiveness for his mistake. Achilles accepted the apology, but said that he would return to the battlefield only when the threat became real and immediate. At this time, the situation of the Greeks was getting worse. The Trojans, sensing the weakness of the enemy, began to attack, and soon their army came close to the camp of the Greeks. Seeing that the situation was critical, Patroclus, a close friend of Achilles, asked permission to put on his armor and lead the Greeks into battle. Achilles, seeing the zeal of his friend, gave his consent. Patroclus, dressed in Achilles' armor, led the Greeks onto the battlefield. At first, luck was on their side, and they managed to push the Trojans back. But then the unexpected happened. Patroclus encountered Hector, Paris' older brother and Troy's best warrior. In a fierce battle, Hector destroyed Patroclus, stripped him of his armor, and proclaimed his victory. When news of Patroclus' end reached Achilles, he was overcome with unspeakable pain and rage. He realized that he could no longer stand by. His duty to his friend and comrade demanded revenge. Achilles vowed to avenge Hector and to finish the job at any cost. He asked his mother, Thetis, for new armor, and she, feeling sorry for her son, asked Hephaestus, the god of smiths, to create for him the most magnificent armor imaginable. Having received the new armor, Achilles went out onto the battlefield again, ready to fight any enemy that stood in his way. Thus began the final act of Achilles' tragedy. His return to the battlefield dramatically changed the course of the war. He avenged Patroclus by destroying everyone who got in his way. Finally, he came face to face with Hector, and in this decisive battle he won by piercing him in the throat with his spear. But even after this victory, Achilles found no peace. His soul was poisoned with grief and rage, and he continued his revenge, dragging Hector's body around the walls of Troy. Only the intervention of Priam, Hector's father, made him stop and return the body for a decent burial. Achilles, despite all his heroic feats and incredible strength, remained vulnerable. His heel, which had not been washed by the waters of the sacred river Styx, served as his weak point. This knowledge gradually spread among his enemies thanks to Troy's allies, the Amazons and the Colchian magicians. These mysterious peoples knew many secrets and plots, and rumors of Achilles' weakness reached the ears of the Trojans. On one of the hot days of battle, when Achilles, full of rage and thirst for revenge, rushed back into battle, his enemy, Paris, was nearby. Paris, being an excellent marksman, watched carefully. He knew that an ordinary blow with a sword or spear could hardly stop Achilles, but he had another plan. Paris raised his bow and drew the bowstring. His hand trembled with exertion, but he concentrated, knowing he had only one chance. He aimed the arrow straight at Achilles' heel, and at that moment divine will intervened. Apollo, who patronized the Trojans, guided Paris's hand, and the arrow flew precisely into the target. The arrow plunged into Achilles' heel, piercing his only vulnerable point. The great hero, feeling a sharp pain, collapsed to the ground. His fall caused shock and confusion among the Greeks. No one could believe that the invincible Achilles had fallen from a simple arrow. His friends and comrades gathered around him, trying to save him, but it was too late. The wound was fatal, and Achilles, feeling the end approaching, spoke his last words to his companions. He asked them to continue the fight and avenge his end. The end of Achilles was a real disaster for the Greek army. His body was solemnly burned, and the ashes were placed in the same urn with the ashes of Patroclus. The Greeks grieved, realizing that they had lost not only a great warrior, but also a symbol of their hope for victory. Without Achilles, their position seemed much more fragile, and the mood in the camp had visibly worsened. Now that their best fighter was gone, the Greek leaders had to find new ways to gain the upper hand over Troy. Everyone realized that a frontal attack would no longer work. Forces were depleted and morale had dropped considerably. Something completely out of the ordinary had to be invented to turn the tide of the war. Commander-in-Chief Agamemnon gathered a council of war, which included the most experienced strategists and wise elders. On the agenda was a single question: how to defeat Troy without Achilles. Proposals came one after another, but most of them seemed either too risky or not effective enough. And then Odysseus, famous for his wit and cunning, came forward. He proposed a plan that at first seemed crazy to the others, but as they discussed it, it became more and more appealing. The idea was to create a huge wooden horse, inside which the best Greek warriors could hide. The horse was to be left at the gates of Troy as a gift to the gods, supposedly to signify the end of the war. The Trojans, thinking that the Greeks had left, would take the horse inside the city, and at night the hidden warriors would go outside and open the gates for the main army. The plan was daring and unpredictable, but that's what made it so tempting. The Trojans, not expecting a trick, could easily fall for it. All that remained was to put the idea into practice. Under the guidance of the master builder Epeus, the Greeks set about creating a giant wooden horse. Every day the work boiled over, and soon the horse was ready. Inside it were placed selected soldiers, ready for the decisive assault. The horse was left at the gates of Troy, and the main Greek army pretended to sail home. The Trojans, seeing the horse, were hesitant at first, but soon their curiosity took over. They decided to lead the horse into the city, believing it would bring them good luck. At night, when Troy was asleep, the Greek warriors got off the horse and opened the gates for their comrades. The assault began, and Troy, taken by surprise, was unable to offer proper resistance. The city was captured, and the war finally ended with the victory of the Greeks. Thus ended a 10-year conflict that went down in history as the Trojan War. The Greeks won thanks to their ingenuity and resourcefulness, and the wooden horse became a symbol of cunning and military skill. Even after his departure, Achilles continued to play an important role in the events surrounding the Trojan War. According to legends, his spirit did not go to the afterlife, but remained on earth to help his countrymen in their struggle. It is said that he appeared to the Greek warriors in the form of a shadow or ghost, encouraging them and inspiring confidence in victory. In addition, some sources claim that Achilles married the daughter of Achelos, the god of winds, after his departure. This woman, known as Deianira, became his consort in the afterlife. Together they ruled over the island of Leuca, which was considered the place where the souls of heroes find rest and eternal glory. The name of Achilles and his exploits continued to live in the memory of people. Poets and writers created new works dedicated to his life and exploits. Homer is credited with the creation of Iliad and Odyssey, in which Achilles occupies a central place. These epics became classics of world literature and had a huge impact on the development of culture and art. The legend of Achilles remains one of the most vivid and significant in world culture. It symbolizes not only strength and courage, but also the tragedy of human nature. The story of Achilles teaches us that even the greatest heroes can have weaknesses, and that sometimes the price of glory is too high.